Welcome back to another episode of Choose Courage Inc., where we help creatives, entrepreneurs, and aspiring corporate escape artists break free from the systems that were never built for them and create businesses where people, creativity, and courage come first. I'm Vivianne Castillo, founder of Choose Courage Inc., and today's going to be a little different. What you're going to hear today is a replay. It's actually my talk from the Walkout event that I did in January, the live event I did with Rachel Dekas, Dan Mull, because honestly, I had just seen one too many ads for UX conferences about how to endure a job you hate. And I just thought, no. What if instead we helped people experience hope and wonder and possibility? What if we helped people be a little less afraid? And so I'm bringing this one back to you now on purpose because the questions in this talk, they don't expire. So if you're sitting in a role right now that's dimming your light, if you've been quietly asking yourself whether the problem is you or the system you're trying to survive, then this is still for you. And it was for the room that day, and it's for you today as well. In this episode, you're going to hear me open with a story from the early 1900s. Just tune in. You'll see. So if you've ever written off entrepreneurship without even running your numbers, if your anger about how work has treated you feels like something you're supposed to suppress, if you're standing in that hallway right now wondering if there's a door, then this one's for you. So grab a pen and paper, my lovely dehydrated friends, and let's get into it. My name is Vivianne Castillo, and some of you might know me from being the founder of Humanity Centered, which was, FastCo award-winning consultancy that I built that really was around helping organizations be more trauma-informed and human-centered, as well as helping to think about that in terms of their product design. And I'm, since then I have, stepped away from that and have leaned more into what has just been bringing me a lot of life and joy over the last couple of years, which is, I'm now the founder of Choose Courage Inc., who is also hosting this event today, where I help values-led entrepreneurs do similar things of what I did with Humanity Centered, how to help you build a business that pays well, feels good, and protects your peace without burning out or selling your soul. For those of you who don't know me, maybe I'll give you some background things to give you some context on me. I'm a former counseling human service professional who made a career switch into tech and design about 10 years ago. So I bring a lot of the kind of counseling kind of background into my work. I'm a passionate self-care advocate. I'm a diehard Chicagoan who permanently immigrated to Mexico in May and love it, love the life I'm building here. I'm a creative at heart whose current mediums are coaching, consulting, entrepreneurship. I think it is just some of the most creative outlets that I've been able to enjoy. And I'm committed to choosing courage over comfort in every facet of my life. Let's see, what other things would be helpful for you to know? I'm a Black woman who has a multicultural upbringing. My mom is half Korean and lived in Korea and moved to the States when she was young. So if you were raised by an immigrant Asian parent, you know what it is. I didn't get beatings as a kid. Like I had to do book reports and papers. That was like my upbringing. Okay. Born and raised in the States. Let's see. I'm an INFJ for those of you who care. If you're into the Enneagram, I'm a three wing two. Although I've noticed I recently took it and maybe it's because I'm just healing more and I'm just in a better space and place. Now I'm a 2-wing 3. For those of you who know, let's see. I'm a Cancer, Libra for moon and rising. I am 4 years, 11 months, and 14 days sober of working in corporate America, and damn, it feels good. I also have my master's in counseling, and I have my master's in theological studies, which a lot of people don't know that I have that degree. But when you're working with people who are suffering and in crisis, things like where is God and like spirituality always come up. So these are just, again, some context. And this all influences how I'm going to be approaching this topic. And it also influences the way that I bring more of a practical as well as a more like emotional therapeutic lens to my work. So before we get going though, I wanted to kick us off today with a story from the early 1900s. Some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but I want to take you back to how psychiatric hospitals had a peculiar way of determining whether someone was sane enough to re-enter society. They would bring a patient into a room with a sink, where the staff would then place a plug in the sink, turn on the faucet, and wait for the sink to overflow. And as water bubbled over the ledge and splashed onto the floor below, the patient was then handed a mop, and the staff would leave the room, closing the door behind them. And then, after some time had passed, they would return to check in on the patient. Now, if the patient had turned off the water, unplugged the sink, and mopped up the water that had spilled onto the floor, they were deemed as ready to go home and enter back into society. But if the patient opted to frantically mop as water continued to gush over the sink and onto the floor, failing to remove the sink's plug and turn off the faucet, they were deemed as needing more time in the psychiatric hospital because they had failed to acknowledge and address the root of the problem. And so many of you, when it comes to making your corporate job work in a system that was never designed with your ability to thrive in mind, are frantically mopping. You know you're capable of more than what your role currently allows. You can feel it. You've been told corporate is about growth, opportunity, and impact, that it values creativity, leadership, and humanity. And yet your lived experience tells a different story. One where those values are celebrated in language, but quietly deprioritized in practice, especially when they challenge comfort, power, or profit. You're asked to bring your whole self to work until the self asks hard questions, until the self disrupts timelines, until the self refuses to shrink. And so you optimize instead. You overperform instead. You attend the trainings, you read the books, you sit in the meetings, you tell yourself, this is what progress looks like, that if you just get better at mopping, eventually the floor will stay dry. But meanwhile, the system keeps running and the faucet stays on. And so now you're tired, you're burnt out, and you're starting to ask a question that you haven't let yourself ask before. Is the problem me? Or is it the system I'm trying to survive? And so some of us have been frantically mopping, not because we're incapable or uncommitted, but because we've been taught to endure dysfunction instead of daring to imagine and move toward an exit. And so today, I want to challenge that, because when a system teaches you to slow down long enough, something subtle happens. You learn how to coast, you learn how to endure, and before you know it, you've mistaken stagnation for stability. And that's when the real costs begin, because then you start to pay with your identity. Every day you dim yourself, you forget who you actually are. You then pay with your skills because now you're practicing how to stay small, not how to build. You pay with your time because with every one more year is a year you're not creating the business or life that could have changed everything. You pay with your health. Burnout, increased anxiety, exhaustion, they aren't badges, those are bills. And you end up paying with your freedom, because what starts as golden handcuffs quietly becomes weighted and rusted chains. And so today, I won't be handing you another mop. And I'm not here to help you survive longer, cope better, or endure more gracefully. Instead, I want to help you remove the plug and turn off the faucet. And the way that we do that isn't through recklessness or blind optimism. It's through a new relationship with hope. Not hope as a feeling, not hope as wishful thinking, but hope as a discipline, as a practice, as a set of choices you make toward building a life that doesn't require constant cleanup. And so we sent this survey to y'all before the event, and we asked this question: what's the biggest thing keeping you stuck right now? And 75% of you said financial uncertainty and need for stability. But you know what I see and hear when I read that? I actually hear something much more human, and I hear fear. But let me offer you a gentle reframe. And it's that most people aren't actually afraid of leaving. They're experiencing learned helplessness. And that's a good thing. We can work with this, okay? Learned helplessness doesn't mean you lack courage. It often means that you've been conditioned over time to believe that you have less agency than you actually do. So then what's the difference between helplessness and powerlessness? I'm so glad you asked. This is a really, really important question that we have to answer. In Dan's presentation, he talked about the ceiling and the floor. And understanding this is key to not staying at the floor of emotional dysregulation and enjoying the heights of creativity, not just in business, but also in life. And so I think the easiest way to remember the difference is that helplessness is all about the internal, whereas powerlessness is all about the external. So when I'm thinking about helplessness comes from inside us. It's this feeling often originates from our internal beliefs and perceptions about our abilities and effectiveness in handling situations. So, for example, you want to leave corporate, but you keep thinking, I'm not entrepreneurial. I wouldn't know where to start. I'm not the kind of person who takes risks. And no one is stopping you from exploring those options, right? No one is stopping you from talking to people or even testing ideas, but the belief that you'd fail keeps you frozen. And so the barrier isn't your ability, it's belief. This is helplessness. But with powerlessness, this typically stems from external factors beyond our immediate control. Things like systemic barriers, societal norms, or decisions made by others that limit our options. It's not about what we believe about ourselves, but about real world constraints that dictate what is or isn't possible in a given moment. And while powerlessness can feel just as frustrating as helplessness, the key difference is that no amount of personal effort or mindset shifts alone will remove these external obstacles. For example, the job market is volatile. The situation is caused outside of my control and my circumstance, and I have no immediate control over it. Now, that brings me into the source of control and how that differs between helplessness and powerlessness. For helplessness, it's centered on feeling inadequate to change our situation, often regardless of our capabilities. So, again, imagine if you want to start your own business, but you keep telling yourself, I don't have what it takes. I'm not the kind of person who builds something from scratch. No one is physically stopping you from exploring an idea. No one is stopping you from talking to potential customers or even testing your offer. You could take low risk steps, research, conversations, side projects, but the belief that you'd fail keeps you from even starting. Helplessness is more about this internal block, right? It's when we believe we can't do something, even when we technically can't. I mean, Dan just showed us how to do that from a numbers perspective. And often this belief comes from past experiences, fear of failure, or a deeply ingrained narrative about who gets to be a founder or a business owner. But in reality, the capacity to build is already there. What's missing isn't ability, it's trust in your ability to begin. But for powerlessness, you're building, let's say you're building your business. I'll give you an example, a real example of a client I'm working with right now. You're building your business and relying on a platform like Upwork to find clients. And then one day your account is banned. You appeal the decision, but it's final. There's nothing you can do to reverse it. No amount of effort, explanation, or mindset work changes that outcome. The door is closed. Now, powerlessness happens when external forces are in control, and no amount of effort, willpower, or positive thinking will change the situation. Unlike helplessness, where the barrier is mental, powerlessness is when actual constraints exist. The key here, though, is recognizing when something is truly out of our hands and figuring out where we do have choices, like staying patient, adjusting expectations, planning differently next time. So even with this example, powerlessness doesn't mean you're out of options. We're actually building a whole different market stream in light of this, in light of my client going through this right now. But what it means is that this particular path is no longer available. So the work becomes shifting your focus from what you can't control to what you still can. Identifying alternate platforms, building direct relationships, leveraging your network, or developing new ways to source clients. And yet, powerlessness is about recognizing what's out of your control, but you also still have to identify where choice still exists. A lot of people just build a home in powerlessness and they're like, that's it. It's a wrap. That's all there is to it. But there's actually so much more choice and opportunity, even in those moments. And so, why does this matter for hope? Most of us aren't stuck because we're powerless. We're stuck because we've been taught to treat helplessness as permanent. And so, hope as a discipline begins here by learning to tell the difference between what you can't change yet and what you've simply stopped believing you can. Again, it's one of the many reasons why I love Dan and Rachel's talks because they're unlocking ways of thinking that maybe we've been finding ourselves stuck in. And they're making us realize, oh, actually, there's a different way. Actually, maybe I can stop frantically mopping and now I can start to reach for the plug. And so once we learn to tell the difference between what we truly can't change yet and what we've simply stopped believing in, or what we've simply stopped believing we can, I often see something else surface. And that something is anger. And I've seen it a couple of times appear in the chat as well. Not rage, not bitterness, but a clear, grounded anger that says, this isn't right. So it brings me one of my favorite quotes, and it goes like this: Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are. And this quote matters because most of us were taught that anger is something to manage, to suppress, or move past as quickly as possible. But anger, when it's honest, is information. It's your nervous system saying, yo, a boundary's been crossed and this ain't it. And for many of us, that anger shows up around how the systems we work within treat us. Anger at how your time is treated as infinitely expandable. Anger at how your creativity is extracted but rarely protected. And to be clear, that anger doesn't make you ungrateful. It means you're paying attention. It means you haven't forgotten yourself. But anger on its own isn't enough because anger without direction hardens into bitterness. And I've seen that a couple times in the chat too. Some people mentioning bitterness because you've been without direction, the anger. Anger without direction hardens into bitterness. And that's where the second daughter needs to show up. And that's courage. Courage to imagine something different and to question the narrative that this is just how it is. Courage to stop believing that you need your employer more than they need you. Because here's the quiet lie many of us absorb: that stability only exists inside working for an employer, that safety only comes from permission, and that leaving is reckless instead of rational. But hope challenges that lie. And that's why I love talking about it and just doing it. But in order to challenge that lie, hope needs three. Because what transforms hope from wishful thinking into sustainable action? What does hope actually need? It needs three things. It needs a plan, a path, and people. Come on, alliteration. A plan, a path, people. So let's start with the first one, okay? Hope needs a plan. And when we say hope needs a plan within the context of getting out of a toxic, codependent relationship with an employer, we're really talking about one thing. We're talking about financial reality. And I want to name this plainly because money talk is where hope often goes to die, where we end up shutting down ideas, dreams, and hopes that we have. But it also is where things can become real, which again, appreciate Dan and everything he chopped up in his talk. Because financial planning is also real. Financial planning isn't pessimism. It's not a lack of faith. And I wouldn't even categorize it as you assuming the worst. Financial planning is how you make hope durable. Some of y'all are writing off the possibility of entrepreneurship and you haven't even thought about your numbers. You just write it off. Nope, can't do it. It's too much. It's too hard. But if we're able to sit with our numbers a little bit more intentionally and thoughtfully, it can actually make hope more durable. It can make things see and be more possible. Because without a plan, hope stays abstract. Hope becomes this form of escapism that we use to help us get through the workday. Man, it'd be so great to start a business. But it's just a form of escapism, and it's not something that you eventually tend to take action on. It floats, it inspires, but it doesn't protect you when fear shows up at 2 a.m. Without a plan, courage burns hot and fast, and then exhaustion sets in. But a plan gives your nervous system something to hold on to. And for many of us, our workplace has taught us a distorted relationship with money, that a paycheck equals safety, benefits equals security, and walking away means falling apart. And I want to challenge this, but let me give you some context first. I moved to Mexico 7 months ago, and I have zero plans on moving back to the States, like ever. No, thank you. And though that has allowed me to build a life and a business that allows me the flexibility and freedom to do what I want and live where I want, is something that I believe capitalism and corporate America hope you never understand. And that is that contrary to what your employer wants you to believe, security isn't something you're given, it's something you build. That stable job disappears the moment the company restructures. That safe paycheck is only safe until leadership changes direction. That dependable career path, well, it depends entirely on someone else's approval. But when I stepped out of those limiting beliefs around security, I realized that when you step into greater ownership of your career, your business, your creativity, your earning potential, your self care, security takes on a completely different meaning. Now, security becomes capacity to pivot, capacity to be creative in how you design your career, capacity to create value on your own terms and not wait for validation of strangers or employers who will never see or understand what you're capable of. And so my entire framework has changed because now security has stopped being passive. I've stopped seeing and believing that my security is at the mercy of someone else. I can wake up one night, day two to be specific, of Trump's presidency, look at the website about how he's leading us into the golden era and say, absolutely not, and decide to do the process of permanently immigrating, getting my visa and everything to Mexico because I didn't want to be passive, right? I've stopped seeing and believing that my security is at the mercy of someone else. Now, security is intentional, it's strategic, it's built over time. Because once you understand that security is something you build, chat, like you stop waiting for permission and you can now design a business and a life that actually supports you and allows you to be and feel more free, whatever that looks like. But security first comes from understanding your numbers, from knowing what you need, what you can tolerate, and what you're building toward. I remember I was building Humanity Centered in the spring of 2020. And at the end of 2020, I took 2.5 months of short term leave because I was exhausted. I was working in corporate full time and I was also building my business. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine during my break, and I was like, I don't know if I want to leave corporate. I want to do my own thing, but I would be leaving this secure job. I had a really good reputation at Salesforce, been there for 2 years, and yet was on a FaceTiming texting basis with some of our C-level executives. I had a great, everything was great. And I was like, I would be leaving something secure for something unsecure and just unpredictable. And she was like, yeah, but that's a false sense of security because they could fire you tomorrow and not think twice about it. She's like, I actually think you just need to do some math here and think about what is actually enough for you. She's not to the point where you're eating ramen noodles every day, right? But she's, what's the actual number that you need to feel good about the kind of life that you want to live? And when I ended up doing the math, I found out and discovered that it was actually less than I was being paid. But what that ended up doing was it actually gave me the emotional cushion to think and dream about what was possible. Because depending on your backgrounds, if you have financial trauma in your life, if you have, an upbringing with that, if you've experienced that in your adult life, like sometimes financial security is actually more so about the emotional element of it all than anything else. So it gave me some emotional cushion to think and to dream a little bit about how I can make this possible. And so again, we have to start by giving our nervous system something it can hold on to, a plan. And a hope with a plan asks different questions. It's just a different game. You're asking, okay, what do I actually need each month to feel good? Some of you have written off entrepreneurship and haven't even done the math. So what do you actually need? How long could you sustain yourself if you made a change? What's negotiable and what isn't? What systems can I put in place so my future self isn't constantly bracing? Because I don't want to be in that like constant state of scarcity and tension either. And for me, it's a reminder that hope is a choice here. It takes the form of these kind of like small financial actions that build hope, that make hope more durable. Micro choices equal hope muscle building. So my encouragement for y'all, run your numbers this weekend. What is the number? Open a separate, exit fund account if you need it. Start doing your research on healthcare. But part of it is like, I can't be passive anymore. Like I have to have more of an intentional relationship with myself and with what's possible. And so again, this isn't about quitting tomorrow or burning everything down. I'm really just trying to demonstrate that this is about choice. A plan doesn't rush you. It creates options and allows you to see that you have opportunities. And options and opportunities are incredibly powerful. All right, let's go to the second one. Hope needs a path. And this is where people get stuck. Many of you are asking yourself, what kind of business should I start? What would I even do? What if I pick wrong? What if I waste a year going down the wrong path? And when we asked you in the survey, what is the biggest thing keeping you stuck right now? 75% of you said that you don't know what kind of work you do outside your current role. So let me give you some good news first. You don't need to have it fully figured out. You just need it clear enough to start. One of the biggest myths about leaving corporate is that you need to pick the perfect path, that there's a right business model out there and your job is to find it before you begin. I'm sure me, Dan, and Rachel will get into this during story time, but my business has changed and evolved and pivoted many times over the course of its existence. It's a part of the journey and the creativity. But some of us were like, I need the one thing. It needs to be as guaranteed as my unstable employer's promise to keep me. But here's the thing, like, you can have flexibility here because that's not how this works, right? So the point isn't to pick the right path. The point is to pick one and begin, try, start, see what's possible. And so here's some options to get curious about, especially as I was looking at some of the feedback in the surveys. Some options to pick through. So I have here freelancing, project based, right? This is usually the quickest path to revenue because you're selling your existing skills by the projects. Y'all are gifted. I know your employer will never like fully recognize and see your potential, but like y'all are gifted. You're skilled, you're capable. There's so much you can do outside the walls of a 9 to 5. Consulting, coaching, which is more expertise based, right? You're selling your knowledge and strategic thinking, typically higher rates than freelancing, depending on how you're structuring your business. Agency, team, agency, having it be more team based. And I know, especially like Dan, that is like his bread and butter. You're building something that can scale beyond just you. He already showed us the math of what that could look like. Portfolio career, which is like a mix of the two, right? It could be a mix of a couple things, whether you're mixing consulting and coaching. It's Burger King. You can have it your way, baby. Or it's something entirely different. But the key here is it should still leverage or deepen the skills and passions that you already have. I know there's some folks on the call who are thinking about, hey, I actually want to go back to school and go back into social work or counseling and open up my own practice. That comes from your already skills, passions, and beliefs around caring about people and doing right by others. So yeah, that makes sense. I have someone that I've worked with where they built a coffee company because they were so passionate about it, but they also wanted to challenge people's relationship to coffee and be like, hey, coffee is actually a way to embrace rest and to not just fuel yourself in these hyper capitalistic systems. But you can pick one and then just remember it doesn't have to be forever. And I think part of that comes from needing like a deeper why. Like for me, I've always been driven by a desire to help people be and feel more free. So that allowed me to be a trauma and addiction therapist, allowed me to then career switch into UX as a researcher, then becoming an innovation consultant, then creating a 7-figure consultancy, helping employers be less toxic and less terrible. Now I'm helping other people build their own businesses without needing to forsake themselves. And for fun, I'm building an astrology perpet app because I can. So again, like you don't have to be married to the thing forever. You will learn in month 3 of working out something for yourself. You'll learn that that is worth more than 3 years of planning about yourself. Now, I want to talk about what makes any of these paths actually work because you're not leaving to starve for your art or for your passion. That's not what I want to encourage, nor do Dan and Rachel want to encourage. When I talk about constructing profitable offers, I mean something specific. Because again, these are the paths, but you want to be making an offer towards someone that they see it as, yes, I need this, and you're someone I want to work with. Again, Dan was already kind of talking about this. And so I'll give you like super high level quick framework. Market plus problem you solve plus your solution equals your offer. Very high level. Let me give you an example. Ex leaders who are struggling with team velocity, I teach people research systems. That's a 5K research process intensive. I'm working with solo founders with no design skills. I will help them to design MVPs of their product. That's an 8K 4-week sprint. But again, I'm just giving you like a framework of how to be thinking about these numbers and plugging things in. You see, and it's specific, right? It's not super vague. That's not I help people with UX. That's a real offer that someone can say yes or no to. It's a real offer I've had people say yes or no to. And I was able to build humanity centered to the 7 figures by starting here. You know, when I started humanity centered, one of our core offerings in the beginning was a live cohort experience. And I remember going on LinkedIn at the time, and this was before people like hated Starbucks. And I was like, I'm offering, $10 Starbucks gift cards to folks who want to just give me their feedback and thoughts on how they're handling these current problems. Talked about 15 people, understood what they were doing, what was working, what wasn't, what their workarounds were. And from that, created the first offering. And within our first month of business, we made about 75K, which for me was a signal of, okay, this is an offering. This is something that people want and you can support them with. And then it evolved into more B2B kind of consulting work. And now I hope professionals do the same thing and try to show you the mistakes I made so you don't have to make them. But the point is that the path doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be yours and it needs to be started. Pick something, test it, keep it moving. That's how the path reveals itself. And last but not least, hope needs people. Many of you are asking, again, what kind of business should I start? What would I even do? What if I pick wrong? And actually, when we asked you, what is the biggest thing keeping you stuck right now? 22% of you said that you don't have a network outside your current company. And I get it. You know, you've been heads down for years. Your work friends are your corporate friends, your trauma bonding buddies, and your LinkedIn is full of people who only know you as an employee. And so the idea of networking feels gross and transactional. But here's the truth that going alone will guarantee failure. Not because you're not capable, not because you're weak. You know, you can have the best plan, the clearest path, the most profitable offer, and still hit a wall at 3 a.m. when the fear kicks in and there's no one to call who understands what you're going through. A lot of people treat entrepreneurship as a solo journey, when in reality, it should be a shared journey. That's why, like, I'll see on Instagram the videos where it's, I live my 9 to 5, so I can work 24/7. And I'm like, yeah, because you didn't detox anything from your previous workplace and now you're trying to grit it all on your own with the same tools that wanted you to leave in the first place. And so community isn't a nice to have, it's infrastructure. It's just a subtle mindset switch of how to be thinking about community. Because here's what community provides. It provides accountability. When fear hits and you're convinced you made a terrible mistake, you need someone who can remind you why you're doing this. Reality checks. Your price is too low. Your offer is too broad. Your website copy sounds like corporate speak. You need people who will tell you the truth and help you to honor the vision of the business that you have for yourself. Even in terms of like leads, right? Referrals, introduction, collabs. Often your first clients will likely come from someone who knows someone who needs what you do. And last, I'll put up here is sanity, like someone who gets it, right? Who understands why you left, who isn't trying to convince you to go back. And I can tell you from experience, every major milestone in building humanity centered happened because of community. The client that took us to 7 figures, a referral from someone I met at a conference. The pivot that saved the business when we were struggling, a conversation over coffee with someone who'd been there before. The courage to actually implement a 4-month break policy. I did a mandatory PTO policy of 4 months in 2024. And when everyone told me, yeah, that's financially unwise and impossible, I talked to other founders who believed it was possible, and then we beat our revenue goals by 20%. Without community, I would have failed. But more importantly, I would have failed at I believe there's just like a different way to do business. Like I think business and I think entrepreneurship can and should be a healing experience. It should free us from unhealthy beliefs around value and impact. It should help us to trust our gut again. It should help us be less afraid. It should help us to be more creative. And it's important to have community around you who also see that and want that for you. Business can be done differently. You don't have to leave one cage and build yourself a whole new one. But without community, that wouldn't have been possible. Without community, I would have doubted. I would have been in my head. And so here's what building community actually looks like. It can look like one coffee chat outside your company per week. Virtual accounts, don't worry. You don't have to actually see people. Virtual account doesn't have to be formal, but even just one conversation with someone who's not a coworker can be a stepping stone towards building community. One DM to show, to someone to doing one DM to someone doing what you want to do. Not a sales pitch, not a real question, but just an opportunity to build relationship with people in the communities that you want to be more like and experience more of. And then showing up. You showed up here. You're already doing it by being at the walkout. Maybe you decide to join Dan's program on building a 7-figure business agency. Maybe you decide to work with me in, entrepreneurship group coaching so you can learn how to build a business that pays well, feels good, and protects your peace without burning out or selling your soul. Maybe you take Rachel up on her invitation to connect with her more. But this is a big part of it, showing up. And so it's about intentionality with that. You don't need a massive network, but you need a real one. A lot of y'all don't have a real network, a real community. But really like a handful of people who actually know what you do, who you do it for, and why it matters. That's what makes hope sustainable. That's what makes hope sustainable. So I'll close by saying this. Walking out reckless, it's the only rational response to a job that's dimming your light. You don't have to endure anymore if you don't want to. And I'm especially speaking to those where if you had an upbringing with emotionally unavailable parents or parents who just weren't present, and it has been really hard for you to articulate what you want and need because of that, you're used to just enduring. I just want you to know, you don't have to endure anymore. And a lot of our workplaces exploit that and take advantage of those things. Hope isn't magic. Hope is a muscle. And when you strengthen it the same way you strengthen any muscle, you have to use it, right? Every choice to keep building, even when fear is screaming at you to stop. Every conversation outside your company. Every small step toward financial clarity. Every time you pick the path and begin instead of waiting for perfect certainty. That's how hope gets stronger. And the 3 things we talked about today, a plan, a path, and people, these aren't theoretical, they're practical, right? Financial reality, a profitable offer, community that has your back. And that's what makes walking out possible. Rachel, Dan, and I created the walkout because we wanted to help you experience all 3 of these things. I remember hitting up Dan and Rachel, and I was seeing an ad for X conference. I'm like, I don't think people want another conference about how to endure and stay in a job they hate. I was like, how do we help people experience hope and wonder and possibility? How do we help people be less afraid? How do we help people be more curious? And so we're not here to convince you to leave, but we are here to show you it's possible if you want to choose you. And listen, some of you might stay in corporate for a while as you build your exit path. That's strategic. I understand. I was in corporate while I was building my business. I get it. Some of you might leave next month. Some of you might realize corporate isn't actually the problem and find a way to make it work. All of those are valid, but here's what I know for sure. And a lot of this comes from your survey results as well. A lot of you are working through a lot of grief, right? You have grief, or you're currently experiencing grief because of what happened to you in these workplaces, how these employers made you feel, how they've caused you to stop trusting your gut, how they've caused you to believe more and more that you're not enough, and the ways that your creativity has been extracted instead of protected, the ways your boundaries were ignored, the ways that you were told your worth was conditional on your productivity. And that grief is very real and it deserves space. But also, grief is a hallway. Grief is a hallway. It's a transition space and it's not a living place. It was never meant to become a home for you. And we can't live where we were never intended to take up residence. There's a door at the end of that hallway. It may not seem like it for some of you, but I promise you there's a door at the end of that hallway. I can't promise you that it's easy. I won't lie to you about that, but I can promise you that it's yours and it can be worth it. That anger you feel, right? It's information. That courage you're building, it's very real. And that hope that you're protecting, it's not naive. It's probably the most rational thing you could do. Thanks for hanging out with us and diving into some of these real and unfiltered conversations. We know your time is valuable, and so we don't take it for granted. If today's episode made you think, if it challenged you, or gave you something new to consider, we'd love for you to hit that follow button on whatever streaming service you're using. That way, you'll never miss an episode when we drop them. And if you want to go even deeper, sign up for our newsletter at choosecourageinc.com, and you'll get updates on new episodes, access to exclusive freebies, and first dibs on coaching opportunities and other resources to help you make bold moves in your life and business. So we appreciate you, we see you, and we're rooting for you. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, and a friendly reminder to drink some water.